Minister, welcome to the programme.
Good evening.
Isn't it clear from everything that you and the PM said today that the country within a 10-year window of doing harm to Australia is China?
Well, the Defence Strategic Update 2 years ago made clear that we are within that window. And it's the whole landscape that we face, but this is a critically fundamental observation that was made 2 years ago. And the question that is then left begging is, what are we going to do about it? You know, what is going to be the response to that? And that's why this review is so important to look at how Australia can be best positioned.
Forgive me for interrupting there, but is there a reason why you won't use the word China? You've already said that China's rapid military build-up gives you sleepless nights. It's China tonight that's about to start live drills around Taiwan. Just to confirm, the primary focus of the Defence Review is China.
Well, China is seeking to shape the world around it in a way that we've not seen before. I mean, that is happening. And that creates real strategic challenges for us, not least because China is our largest trading partner. But you're right in observing that the military build-up that we've seen from China is the biggest military build-up that we have seen occur in the world since the end of the Second World War. That means something, and in the face of that, it is really important that we are in a position to make sure that Australia remains safe and that we have a potent defence force that can do that job, and that's why this review is so important.
Let's talk about that safety, because if a serious threat to Australia emerges, as you fear, within that 10-year window, you won't have the assets that you say are vital to Australia's defence, that is, a fleet of nuclear submarines. How vulnerable is the country in this critical window?
Well, again, it's a very good question, and you're right as well in saying that the next generation of nuclear-powered submarines is beyond that 10-year window. It's why what we saw under the former government over the last 10 years has been such a failure in national security. I mean, we lost precious years over the last 10 years in seeking to have Japan build our next generation of submarines and then walk away from that, do a deal with
and yet the leader of the opposition, forgive me, but the leader of the opposition, Peter Dutton, said that he was on the verge of a deal with the US that would fill that capability gap. Is that deal a possibility? Was it a possibility, or is he overstating it?
Well, let me put it this way. There is nothing that I've been briefed on since becoming the Minister for Defence which would bear out what the Leader of the Opposition has said. I mean, I think the truth is that in terms of the legacy that we had been left by the former government was the next generation of submarines, the nuclear-propelled submarines, not coming into play until the 2040s. And so what that really means is that over the last decade of dithering, we have seen a capability gap of almost 20 years open up, and that's really now the challenge for us to close. And again, this is in a context where it was the former government's own review, which made clear that we're within that 10-year window, which is why this work is so important.
Let's talk about the current review. The Prime Minister said that a key aspect of the Defence Review will be interoperability with allied military forces. Now, we understand that means the US military, of course. Does that mean giving up some of Australia's sovereignty?
No, but sovereignty is a really important question in the midst of this. And you know, we need to have interoperability with the United States. We have a lot of close operations, close exercises with the United States. We have a number of Australian personnel who are embedded within the United States system, and indeed some in reverse. We get enormous benefit out of that, and that really is if you like, you know, the practical expression of our alliance with the United States. Within the context of that, having sovereignty really matters, and the submarines is a very good example of that. We need a sovereign capability to not just be there to help contest in any contested environment, but to help build our strategic space for both diplomacy and trade. And that needs to be a sovereign capability.
Let's stay with sovereign, because if Australia's forces become so locked into the US military machine, doesn't that mean that you'd be pre-committed to any regional conflict the US became involved in?
No, and that's again a very important question, and it's very important to hear this answer. In terms of any engagement that Australia participates in, that is a sovereign decision of our country, and it has always been thus. Right through the history since the Second World War. And so if you look at the most recent engagements in Afghanistan, for example, all of that ends up being a sovereign engagement by Australia, and it's very important that that is maintained. And, I've seen firsthand how that occurs in terms of how that must occur in terms of the initial commitment, but even during the commitment, that there is a sovereign control that's exercisable by any Australian government in respect of our Defence Force. And of course, that's a precondition of how we would operate.
Yes, but you may have heard the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff last week, General Milley, who said that in the event of a conflict in Asia, the US would expect Australia to be shoulder to shoulder with the US, as in previous conflicts in the region. Is that your view too, that we would be shoulder to shoulder?
Well, we have been shoulder to shoulder with the United States in the past. The answer to the question is we will always make the decision about our future engagement in the national interest and in our own terms and based on our own sovereignty. Our alliance with the United States is obviously of fundamental importance to us moving forward, and it always will be.
But does that mean that you see things slightly differently to General Milley, that shoulder to shoulder is not a foregone conclusion here?
Well, I don't think General Milley was suggesting it's a foregone conclusion, and I don't think there was anything in General Milley's answer which suggested that Australia should forego any of its sovereignty in the decision making that we will take in the future.
Penny Wong has been trying to reduce tensions in the region. Did Nancy Pelosi's visit increase the risk of confrontation?
Well, ultimately, the engagement from the United States and Nancy Pelosi in visiting Taiwan is really a matter for the United States and Taiwan. So I'm not going to comment on that, and neither has the Foreign Minister. What's important to say is this, that from Australia's point of view, we obviously do want to see the world acting in a way which reduces tensions as much as possible. We maintain the policy we always have, which is that we do not support any unilateral changes to the status quo on either side of the Taiwan Straits, and that's a very important principle here.
Would you consider a visit to Taiwan yourself?
Well, I'm not planning to visit Taiwan, but our fundamental principle is that we do not support any unilateral changes to the status quo on either side of the Taiwan Straits.
Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, went to Taiwan to make a speech. If Peter Dutton wanted to go to Taiwan, would you support that? That is a matter for them, and I'm not about to suggest that we're telling members of other parties where they can or can't go. What I can do is speak for the Australian government, and the position of the Australian government is, as I've said, and one of the implications or consequences of having a view which is that we do not support any unilateral changes to the status quo is that the one China policy, which has been a feature of Australia's relationship with the world and relationship with China since the 1970s, remains in place, and that's been the policy of governments of both persuasions in this country. Defence Minister, thank you very much indeed for your time. Good night.
Thank you.